Welcome to Solosaurus, a podcast about one-player board and card games. My name is Brandon Waite.
And my name is Carter Mackey.
And this is episode 38, where we're going to be talking about a game about building a coral reef down where it's wetter, down where it's better, under the sea. Reef. The game is Reef. That's the game we were reviewing. But first, we're going to get to the news like we always do. Our first bit of news this week is from Gen Con. Actually, spoiler, all of these announcements are from Gen Con because as we are recording this, Gen Con is happening somewhere where we are not. That makes me really sad, but at least we get the news to keep us going, right?
Right, yeah.
And so our first bit of news is from Fantasy Flight. During the in-flight report this year, Fantasy Flight announced Arkham Horror Final Hour. And this is a standalone game set in the Arkham Horror universe, I guess. It's a 60-minute, fully cooperative Lovecraft monster fighting game. So it's basically Arkham Horror if you were starting in the final hour of the game, which is kind of an interesting concept. There's not a lot of the build-up or anything. Basically, your investigators are stumbling on this ritual right after it's happened. And so, as I understand it, you're trying at first to reverse the ritual if you can. And if you can't, you have to deal with the consequences of it. And based on how well you did trying to reverse the ritual, that sort of determines how bad everything else is.
Right, of course.
It's an interesting idea. I sort of wonder how well these games that are adjacent to bigger series and titles are actually going to do.
Yeah, I don't know. Is it like approximately 60 minutes or is it like actually timed or something like that?
No, it's not timed. Actually, I assumed when I saw the final hour, I assumed it was like a real-time game. It's not that.
Okay.
It's just supposed to be like the last hour of the bigger games, like the epic conclusion only.
Right. I didn't know if this was going to be like Plain Escape for an hour.
That sounds awful.
Yeah.
No, it's not that. It's just, it's that final epic conclusion. It's a pretty neat idea for a game.
Yeah.
It plays 1 to 4 players, and so this is something, if you're interested in that experience, but you've never wanted to sit down and dedicate a couple hours to it, give it a shot. For me, this doesn't seem quite that interesting. Like, Mansions of Madness scratches the Lovecraft itch for me completely. But, I don't know. If Eldritch Horror is your thing, but you just think it's a little too long, you should probably check this out. I think it went on sale at Gen Con right after they announced it.
Like at Gen Con specifically or everywhere after they announced it?
So I think it went on sale at Gen Con, but I assume that means it's going to be in stores everywhere in the next couple of weeks. Because usually they're pretty good about getting it out quickly if it's debuting at a con. Mm-hmm. So if you're at all interested in that, check out Arkham Horror Final Hour from Fantasy Flight Games. The second big announcement from Gen Con, also from Fantasy Flight, they had 1 or 2 in there, was that they have somehow acquired the Marvel license. And I don't know if that means that Upper Deck is done. I assume not, because they've just announced more Legendary expansions recently. So I assume that the Upper Deck is still doing Legendary stuff, but it seems like Fantasy Flight also has access to that license now. So they announced a tabletop miniatures game in cooperation with some other smaller company. But for solo players, one thing that they announced was Marvel Champions LCG. And based on what I can tell just from gameplay videos, this looks like it's built on the bones of the Lord of the Rings cooperative game and the Arkham Horror game, which are hugely popular titles for Fantasy Flight. Especially for solo game community, those 2 games are basically legendary at this point. I've never played either one of them very much. I played a little bit of the Lord of the Rings LCG, but it just that theme didn't grab me in that particular game.
Did you actually own it, or did you just get to play it with someone?
I just played it with somebody, and so I didn't have a chance to really dive into it.
Right.
But it looks like the deck building is simpler in this one than it was in some of those past games. I don't like a lot of upfront deck building. I just like to sit down and play the thing.
Okay, so I'm not super familiar with those systems. You are actually building a deck when you start it? Okay.
Yeah, you do. It's not a ton of deck building options as far as I can tell, but usually you can do some to fill out your deck, and it seems like they've pared that down even more here. In fact, there may be an option just for not building a deck at all, but using sort of the standard deck that comes in the box for each hero,
right?
Which would be really nice for people like me. So, following their standard format, they'll release new content for it every month.
Right.
You will get either a new hero or a new scenario every month, and then that will eventually build up to a big campaign box expansion. it's pretty neat. I mean, it looks really, really good, and I think we are going to have a review copy of that coming this way. Oh. So that is something we'll be taking a look at as soon as we can. Looks interesting, and yeah, just stay tuned here for more on Marvel Champions. We'll definitely be covering it on the show in the future. Oh. That's going to be coming out Q4 of this year. Check that out. This is going to play 1 to 4 players, and you should be hearing more about it in the near future. Our final announcement from Gen Con that is related to solo play, at least, is that CMON has announced the 2nd edition of Zombicide, like the original kind of modern day setting of Zombicide, which is pretty interesting, especially given that they were debuting Zombicide Invader at Gen Con when they made the announcement.
Interesting.
So you can get the medieval Black Plague Zombicide, you can get the sci-fi Invader, or now they're going to revive the original recipe. I never really got a chance to play the game.
Yeah, I mean, I always heard about people playing it or like friends posting on social media about it, but I never actually played it myself either.
I always thought it looked pretty good, actually. I like zombie stuff in theory, but I'm just kind of sick of it at this point.
Right, there's a lot of it.
There's a lot of it, but I always liked the flavor of zombie stuff that they seem to have in these games. I just heard that there were some weird rules as far as like shooting into areas where you have heroes. You're likely to shoot those heroes, which isn't that fun. I don't know. I'm interested in it as sort of an arcadey experience for killing zombies.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, just keep that, in mind. That's going to be coming to Kickstarter in 2020. And so if you want to spend more money on Zombicide, that option is available to you.
Right.
CMON is happy to oblige. I'm sorry, not CMON anymore. Come on.
What?
That's how they prefer it to be pronounced now.
Did we just not know that's how they wanted it pronounced, or they changed their minds?
As I understand it, they recently changed their minds, or, just took a stance. So, yeah, I just recently learned about this. So, come on, games.
Right, as in the abbreviated form of come on.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, yeah.
Right.
So you can say, come on. Why you got to be charging $150 for a big Cthulhu miniature?
Right. Or not using apostrophes. But hey, whatever.
Yeah, right. So if you're interested in that, check out Come On's webpage. And that's all we've got for the news this week. So we're just going to get right into our review, which is for Reef. Reef is a game designed by Emerson Matsuuchi that comes to us from Next Move Games, which is the company that put out Azul, which was a huge hit. This is their 2nd title in their family game line. I think this is a subsection of Plan B games. These are 2 games that have done very well for them to be the first 2 games that they put out. So this comes to us in 2018, plays 2 to 4 players, or plays 1 player if you add one of the solo variants that's on Board Game Geek, which is what we're going to be talking about in this episode. Reef is an abstract game where players are going to take on the role of a coral reef. You're going to be carefully selecting colors and patterns in which to grow and expand, and then on each turn, players are going to choose to pick up a new card from a choice of 4, or play a card that's already in their hand. Each card provides 2 reef pieces of different colors, or maybe the same color depending on your card, and a pattern that's going to score points if the existing reef has it. So whoever has the most points when the reef pieces run out, that player wins. That's the description from Board Game Geek, which talks almost entirely about mechanics. And so if you haven't gotten it from this little description, this is not a thematic game.
No.
Really at all.
Yeah. I mean, taking on the role of a coral reef, okay.
Yeah, I love that phrase. I loved writing it down, and I loved reading it here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like a coral reef when I play this game.
Right, and I typically think of coral reefs as just a personifiable entity.
Yes, absolutely, with higher order thinking and the whole thing.
And goals and desires.
Yes. The nice thing about this theme is it does lend itself to a really beautiful color palette.
It does, yes.
Yeah, in fact, that gets us right into the components for the game, which I'm going to say are lovely.
Yeah, they're nice. Very chunky, like that good kind of thick, heavy plastic. I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah, they're kind of like Duplo Lego pieces a little bit.
Yeah.
Some people were kind of making fun of them after the game came out and thought they were a little dopey looking. I kind of like them. And, on their own, they just feel nice and chunky in your hand. And then over the course of the game, you have these little player boards that you put these pieces out on and stack them up. And I don't know, I think by the end of the game, you've got this really nice looking little reef in front of you. You feel like you've built something.
I mean, I guess I feel like I scored a lot of points and made choices.
Okay. I can see that. I feel like it looks like work has been done here by the end.
Yeah, okay.
It's pleasant to look at.
It is pleasant. I think for me, it's pleasant to place them and stack them. They're satisfying pieces to use. I'll say that.
Okay, that works for me.
Yeah.
And the cards that you get in the game, nice, sturdy card stock. Really, I really love the art on the backs. This is a weird thing, but I really love card backs. And just seeing what like the unifying theme is for a card back in a game. And this is one of my favorite card backs in any game I've played. So that's probably when you know you're in too deep, when you have opinions on things like that. But
yeah, I can't even visualize the card back right now.
Yeah, it's great. It looks like a Reef. It says Reef
on
it.
I mean, I assumed, but okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's really nice. The components are great. I mean, it's a very simple package, and the insert's not great. It's just kind of a weird, slightly bent cardboard insert that doesn't hold the pieces well or anything. It only stands out to me because the insert for Azul was kind of perfect.
Yeah.
Everything had its own little place. Everything was tidy. I guess with these kind of pieces, it's hard to do that. But
I mean, I guess, though, the thing that stood out to me is that the large section of this cardboard insert isn't actually wide enough to fit the player boards in, which is a strange choice in my mind, but,
I kind of wondered if I just got a defective copy or something, because I thought the same thing, like, why wouldn't you be able to fit these in here? Yeah, it's a bizarre choice.
Yeah, it's fine, though.
Yeah, but otherwise, I mean, it's a lovely little game. Very bright, vivid color palette that just makes the whole thing pop on the table.
Mm-hmm.
So it looks like an inviting family game. And the rule set is also perfect for a family-style game. Just like Azul, I mean, you get into playing this in no time at all.
Yeah, the rules are very simple and very quick to read through and kind of intuitive to understand.
Yeah, I had no problem with it at all. And when I went online and started looking for a solo variant for this, there are a couple of them available, and one of them has you playing against an Automa-style opponent. And what killed me about that is that the rules for it were just, they weren't even that long, but they felt too long for what this game is.
Mm-hmm.
The core rules are so short and so compact and simple that having an overcomplicated solo rule set just doesn't make any sense to me. But there are a couple on Board Game Geek that are very simple. In fact, that's one of those is what we're going to be considering today. So if you're interested in games that have really streamlined, simple rules, this is perfect for you. And yet, even though the rules are simple, the play is pretty interesting and has you making some decent decisions, I would say.
Yeah, you really have to think about it. I mean, the way the cards work in that there's the top and the bottom of the cards, where the top, which you have to take care of first, where you add 2 pieces of new Reef to your board, and then you get to score points. It's just a nice kind of order of operation and figuring out, planning it all out. Those things never work together. What you're scoring is never going to be what you have to put down. And so it's just a nice, like a simple kind of tension in playing cards and building your Reef, but a really nice one. Yeah,
I agree. And in fact, tension is the word that comes to mind when I think about this game. And I don't want to make it sound like a heavy Euro, right? Because it's not. This is a very simple game.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel a lot of tension when I play this because, like you said, you've got the top half of the card gives you a couple of pieces of Reef to put down, which can be really helpful because you're looking at the cards in your hand that give you scoring opportunities on the bottom half. And maybe 2 or 3 of those cards could benefit from the pieces that you would get from the top of one of these. But the problem is, the way the scoring works in this game, if you have the pattern on your board that would earn you points on that bottom half, you can score it multiple times if you've got it in the board multiple places. And so I feel like I'm always tempted to hold on to it for another round or another 2 rounds to get just the perfect little pieces in place so that I can score, instead of 4 points, I can score 16,
Mm-hmm.
Because when you set yourself up for that, it feels really good.
Yes.
And then on top of that, you have not just the tension of like, do I play this now and just play it and get my pieces and score 4 points, versus holding on to it. You've got all of that going on. But then also on your turn, you have to decide, am I going to play a card or am I going to pick up a card from the row? And when you're playing multiplayer, there are only a few cards out visible for you to pick up, and you can get a sense for what the other players want. And like if you let this go another round, it may not be there anymore. Mm-hmm. And that's painful.
Yes.
It's so painful. That simple decision of, do it now or wait a turn, is agonizing. It's the same kind of agony that I feel when I play a good worker placement game.
Yes.
With limited spots, and you're just like, I got to do this other thing right now, though.
Yeah, no obvious right choice. It's just hard choices you have to make. And yeah, and this one is so simple because it's either take a card from the card row or play one of the cards you already have. And just the hand limit is like big enough, but it's also small enough to where you don't want to overfill your hand because you want to be able to take that perfect card if it comes out. But yeah, you're just like, it's so easy to just be like, well, I'll just keep collecting cards. And then you have to play a card because you've waited too long to play a card.
Man, the hand limit rule is maybe the thing that gives me the most anxiety. Just knowing when you've got a full hand of cards and none of them are perfectly timed yet, and yet there's another card out there that would put you in the perfect spot.
Mm-hmm.
That feels like so gut-wrenching, I guess. It doesn't feel bad. It just feels like, man, I'm playing a game that is punching above its weight right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was surprised, I guess, by the depth in that experience. When I played this game multiplayer, I felt a lot of tension around those choices. Do I pick this card up now or do I wait? Do I play this card now and score a few points, or do I hold off and score a bunch? That was persistent throughout the entire game, and scores were tight. What's really interesting is when you play multiplayer, you are grabbing these point chips and you're stacking them in front of you after you score. And so that, I don't know how this was for you, but when you see that pile forming in front of someone else, other people's piles always look bigger than your own.
Yes.
And there's something about that method of scoring that just feels like you're always behind.
And just seeing like, oh yeah, I need to trade this in for a 20-point piece. And I'm like, that
feels so bad. Like, well, I don't have enough to make 20 points.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're not even running low on chips. You're just doing that to make me feel bad.
Yeah.
So when I learned about the solo mode for this game, and I think it's probably appropriate to move into that because we basically talked about all the core rules for this game already.
Right. Just building your reef and then scoring points based on the patterns that are there.
Yeah. And the game ends when one color runs out, which is important because there are times when you will want to score one of those combinations you've got, but you don't want to run out of reef at the wrong time when you could score other points.
Right.
So there's even more tension there. But when you start playing the solo mode, a lot of that does disappear because the solo mode for this game, which was created by Board Game Geek user Ryosuke, I guess that's how you say his name. He created this very simple variant where basically you're taking your turn like normal, which is great. That's a perfect start to a solo mode for me. But then when it's I don't even think AI is quite the right term for this, but
right.
Similar to the Azul variant, there's a bot or a set of rules that govern which things get removed from the board to make it harder on you.
Mm-hmm.
You're just going to roll 2 4-sided dice. And one of those dice is going to tell you which card to remove from the card row. Simple as that. The other die is going to tell you what color of reef piece needs to be removed from the game. And it's as simple as that. You look at the card that was removed. If you roll a 1 or a 2, you remove the reef pieces that are on the left side of that card. 3 or 4, you remove the reef pieces on the right.
Mm-hmm.
It's so easy. And so you're spending almost all of your time on your turn, which is fantastic. You're not really doing much to keep up the game at all. But one thing that felt like it was missing for me in this experience was the tension.
What part of the tension?
Well, there's always the randomness of the dice. And do I take this card this round because it might not be here next round? It's completely random which card and which pieces of reef are going to be removed.
Right. Yeah. It's basically, the reef is a little bit more random, but yeah, I feel like for the most part, it's like, which card is it going to be? Well, it's just a 25% chance that it'll take one of the cards I want.
Right. And that's, you can press your luck a little bit in that regard and just hope that the card you're wanting is still there next turn, for instance, if you want to do something else. And that's sort of what you do in the multiplayer game, but you're missing out a little bit on that knowledge of what the other player is going to do, right? And unlike Azul and the solo variant that we talked about there, you can't really plan so much. You can't manipulate the bot rules in such a way that you sort of get the pieces left that you really need to be there.
Right. It's just going to be random.
Yeah, it's just going to be random. And that's not entirely bad, because that means there's like no overhead here.
The simplicity, I mean, just you get to blow through the AI's turn.
Yeah. Which, I mean, you mentioned when we reviewed Azul, one of the things that you wish you could break free of was your need to math out everything that the AI was going to do.
I don't have to worry about that in this game.
No. It's just a much breezier experience because of that, I think. And yet, the decisions that you make on your turn are still meaty.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so it preserves the best kind of tension.
Yeah.
But there's just nothing to go on. You know, like in the multiplayer game, you would have to read your opponent a little bit to decide, like, oh, it looks like they're going for this piece. And you can make an informed guess at what they might do. Mm-hmm. You can't really do that here. The only thing that you could do that is, I think, helpful for manipulating the game state is if you take reef pieces generally at kind of the same pace, you can make the game last longer.
Right.
You can see which direction the dice are going. And at some point, it's out of your control, right? Because it could just keep rolling the same color over and over again. But you can try to take cards from the card row that leave it only with the colors you need for it to take to prolong the game. And in some ways, your score in this game then is dependent on how long you can make the game last.
Right, yeah.
So there's some meat there, I think.
Yeah, there's definitely kind of drawing it out because, I mean, I know that like in one of my games, one of the colors of Reef was getting hit really a lot on the deck. And so I would intentionally try to take those cards to keep the AI from picking them, so it would last a little bit longer.
Yeah, I don't want to overplay that, right? It's not a huge thing, but it's still there.
It's a mild consideration that you make.
Yeah, I think so. And one downside of that is it does mean you end up playing the game and making decisions that are pretty different than what you would make if you were playing multiplayer. Mm-hmm. You know, because in the multiplayer game, you kind of want to make efficient use of the reef structures that you've already got there. If I've already got stacks too high that have a red piece at the top, I'm going to try to find more cards that let me score those, you know, with me manipulating my board very little. Mm-hmm. In the solo game, that's still there, but I'm more tempted to just get the cards out of the way that might make the game end more quickly.
Right.
So it's pushing you to make a different kind of decision. It's not a bad thing. It's just it's going to feel slightly different, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say I would feel like, because I only got to play multiplayer one time, so I don't have a great way of comparing solo to multiplayer, but I do feel like that trying to read the other players, trying to anticipate, like, okay, I'm pretty sure if I kind of hurry up and end the game, I will end with more points than what they have, or I need to catch up, so I don't need to end it. You know, it's like you lose all of that.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And for me, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just a different kind of play experience.
Right.
And it's just helpful to know that going in, I would say. Overall, though, replayability-wise, I would say this game, the core of Reef is highly replayable because the card combinations that you've got in your hand are everything. Mm-hmm. You know, that completely changes how you're going to play game from game. It's so tactical that every game feels different to me. The downside to this for the solo player is this is a purely beat your own score variant.
Yeah.
There's as much replayability there as you'd like. I mean, there's a group of people on Board Game Geek who post their scores so you can compare scores to other people, which I found demoralizing.
Yeah, my scores were nowhere close to what the scores that people are posting.
Man, I know. That happens to me so often whenever I do those online score posting things. Like when I did Azul, I just remember thinking, how on earth do you people do this? I had the same experience with this. I'm apparently real bad at these games, but I do love them.
Right, yeah. I was expecting to score a little bit higher because when I first read the solo rules, I was like, okay, well, this is what I can expect. And then I saw my final score and I was like, no, that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen.
No, yeah, I had the same experience. Although I'll say, if you were playing this game constantly or you were buying it to play it all the time, that would get old probably after a while, unless you're just a real beat your own score kind of guy.
Right.
But I do think that if you had this game on your shelf and you were just looking for a nice, relaxing solo experience, or you just only plan to play it a few times a year or something like that, it feels fine. If you're just expecting it to be something you pull out regularly, I would say you may want to look into some of the other variants that are out there, which we've not really checked into that much.
Right.
I know there's an Automa variant out there, but I didn't want the rules overhead. This one is so simple and streamlined. You do lose out on some of that extra replayability or the tension of playing an AI player, but overall, I think it's a nice, relaxing way to spend 30 minutes.
Yeah, I would say my games didn't even last that long.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, they're really breezy.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're looking for something light in that way, that this feels really good.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I mean, that probably leads us right into the end stage of this review, because this is a smaller game where we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly for this game. And, I would say I got this game for Christmas, and I am just pleased to get it out whenever I see it on my shelf because it looks lovely. I know that when I get it out, it's going to look great on the table. It's going to play and set up very quickly. And the whole thing's going to feel satisfying to me, but it just doesn't take that long.
Yeah, it's a very quick game. It's easy to explain, easy to set up, easy to learn, even if you're playing solo or whatever.
And it doesn't require much of you. You can make some really interesting decisions in the game for sure, but you don't have to math through everything. It's not a big thinky experience. So if you're not looking for one of those, this may be more your speed. And so all of those things together with the fact that the solo rules are so simple, for me, make this game good. I mean, those all go firmly in the good category for me.
Yeah, all those just colorful, simple, easy. Yeah.
In fact, the only bad thing I would say, I guess, I don't even think it's that bad. I'm not sure where else to put it, is that the replayability is beat your own score level replayability.
Yeah. And for me personally, that can wane pretty quickly, like on just my interest in a game.
Yeah, I guess that's true. This going for a solo game is not your go-to move.
No.
Anyway, yeah.
No.
See, for me, it is. I would rather play a solo game than watch TV or whatever. And a lot of nights, I just don't feel up to anything like getting out a bunch of components and setting it all up.
Mm-hmm.
I like big box games the most in theory. And if I'm making a top 10 list, those are the ones that are going to jump to mind because those are the most memorable experiences. But because I'm the kind of person that would get out a game regularly, this one is one that I consider pretty often. Even though it's not super involved and there's not a struggle with an Automa or whatever, it's just breezy and easy. I would put it on the same level as like Space-Based Solo Variant and, Azul and Welcome To. They're all kind of in the same vein there for me. Just
that makes
relaxing.
Sense. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So if you're looking for something that plays over and over again, this probably isn't it. But if you're looking for something you can check out, a handful of times a year and just be pleased with playing it and enjoying the ride as you go, then this is a good experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that.
And so that, for me, there's nothing ugly about this game at all.
Yeah, no, not at all.
It's just a word that doesn't really belong anywhere near it. It's a lovely little package, relatively inexpensive as games go nowadays, and it's just fun.
Yeah.
I would say, though, I'm not sure that I would say this deserves the stamp of approval.
No, yeah, definitely not for me. I mean, it's a good game if you want something simple like that, and like all the things we've talked about, what kind of solo experience it would be. Is good for what it is, but definitely not stomp of approval for me.
No, I don't think so either. And that's from somebody who really loves the core game of Reef. I think it's great. I would say if you're looking for a good family weight game that you can pull out with really, I would say a wide variety of people. Because the theme such as it is, appeals to pretty much anybody, I would say. Pretty inoffensive. Even if people aren't into fantasy and that sort of thing, it's a nice, approachable theme. Rule set's easy, but enough depth to engage people who played before. I think you could get to the table quite a bit if it seems like something that's your thing. And then if you want to be able to play it solo every now and then, it does have an engaging little solo mode here.
Yeah.
So that, for me, that's like the perfect audience for this. And because we say that, the stamp of approval games are something we would recommend you buy, even if you only ever play it solo, I don't think it quite fits into that category for me.
Right, yeah, I agree.
So if you haven't yet tried Reef, or for that matter, Azul, because they're not the same game, but they definitely feel like part of the same family.
Yeah, I would say that. Like, because you like Reef more than I do, and I like Azul, I think, more than you do.
Yeah, I love both games If I had to pick one over the other, I would probably pick Reef over Azul, but it's pretty close.
Right.
And for you, Azul is definitely the winner.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I love both. I don't think you could go wrong with either, honestly. Yeah, it's a lovely little game. It's just not quite Stomp material.
Right.
So if you have it and you haven't checked out this solo variant, definitely go on to Board Game Geek and check that out. We'll try to include a link to that in the show notes. But the variant is again created by Board Game Geek user Ryosuke, and you can find it in the variant section of the forums. And that's all we've got for this episode, folks. This one's a little bit shorter than usual, but we will be back next time with a big box review, so keep an eye out for that. If you haven't heard yet, we are a member of the Dice Tower Network, so you can find out more shows that are in the network at dicetower.com. Go on there and find other podcasts that, suit your particular board gaming taste. Check it out. And while you're checking out stuff online, you should also check out our Facebook and Instagram pages. I don't post that often because I don't really like social media that much. So if you want to follow a page that won't clutter your feed, but will occasionally surprise and delight you with pictures of solo-friendly board games, we are the page for you.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. There's nothing more enticing than minimal engagement, right? So follow us. You can also go onto iTunes and rate or review the show. That seems like a small thing, but lots of people have done it, and it really helps to increase the visibility of the show. So if you haven't done that yet, please do that. That really helps us out quite a bit. And one thing I mention every episode that people take me up on every time is we have a micro badge that you can get on Board Game Geek to show that you are a listener and a fan of the show. It costs 8 Geek Gold, and if you don't have that because Geek Gold is weirdly hard to come by on Board Game Geek, send me a message. I'm more than happy to spot you the stuff you need to get the badge, and you can join the legions of us online that have that on their profiles. So send me a message. I'm more than happy to set that up for you. And that's all we've got for this episode. Until next time, I'm Brandon Waite.
And I'm Carter Mackey.
And this is Solosaurus.